Undercover boss walks in, sees a cashier crying, then hears the one thing no boss should ever hear. "I'm so sorry." The girl choked out, face blotched and soaked with tears, clutching a crumpled receipt like it might hold her together. She stood behind the register, trembling, trying to breathe. The line of customers stared, uncomfortable, shifting, unsure whether to leave or stay and watch it play out. That's when the voice behind her said it, low, sharp, and meant to cut. "God, no wonder your mom offed herself. You're just as pathetic." The boss froze mid-step. He'd come in undercover, wearing a fake name tag and a thrift store polo, ready to play trainee for the camera crew pretending to film a company docuseries. The goal was to spot problems, reward good work, maybe make a little TV magic. He hadn't expected to walk into a scene like this. He hadn't expected that voice. He knew that voice. And now the cashier was sobbing harder, and customers were backing away, and no one, not one employee, moved to help. His jaw locked. Why was no one stepping in? And why was the district manager, why was Jason, smiling? 4 weeks earlier, in an office that always smelled faintly of printer ink and burnt coffee, David Graham adjusted his tie in the reflection of his darkened laptop screen. The last meeting had drained him. HR had flagged another round of complaints from store number 108, a struggling location tucked into a tired strip mall just outside Columbus. Sales were flat, turnover high, and morale, according to exit interviews, non-existent. David had built Graham Mart from scratch, starting with one discount store in Dayton and expanding into a chain with 114 locations across 6 states. He was proud of that. Damn proud. He'd given people jobs. He'd fought to keep stores open through the recession, had stood by employees when margins were razor thin. But lately, things felt off. Too many corporate layers. Too many bland initiatives cooked up in glass towers far from the aisles and break rooms where it all started. David missed the floor. He missed knowing his people. So when the show producers pitched the idea, Undercover Boss with a raw, real edge, he bit. No script, no setups. Just David, a hidden MIC, and a chance to see the truth. And truth was what he wanted. His wife called it a midlife D2. "I know that look," she said over dinner. "You're looking for a reason. Maybe to keep believing in it all." Maybe she was right. So he became Rick? 51, recently unemployed, looking to restart after being downsized. They gave him a clunky wig and dull khakis. A camera crew would pretend to follow him for a job training series. No one would suspect a thing. His first stop, store number 108. He didn't expect much. Maybe a lazy manager. Some messy back rooms. A few stories of quiet heroism he could reward on the finale. That's how these shows usually went. But on day 1, he met her. Ellie, 18, senior in high school. Quiet, kind eyes, always early, always tired. She trained Rick at the register. She never smiled with her mouth, only her eyes. "Been here long?" he asked. 6 months, she said. "Feels longer." He laughed. She didn't. Later, on break, he saw her in the alley behind the store, sitting on a milk crate, fingers shaking as she lit a cigarette down to its filter. He didn't say anything, but he noticed. Over the next few days, he noticed a lot. A shift lead named Tara who barked orders but never lifted a finger. A break room with no working microwave and no clock. Shelves half-stocked. A floor manager who disappeared for hours. And Jason. Tall, tan, loud. District manager. Rolled in once every few days like a king inspecting his kingdom. The crew scrambled when he showed up. They laughed too hard at his jokes. They stiffened when he was near. Something in the way he looked at Ellie didn't sit right with David. Too familiar. Too long. Then there were the whispers. The ones people didn't know they were caught saying. "She's not gonna last. Jason's been on her again. She's too soft. He likes breaking the soft ones." David didn't know what that meant. Not yet. But it made his skin crawl. Then came the night shift. A Friday. Busy. Understaffed. Ellie was swamped at Register 2, a line down the aisle. Rick stepped in to bag. Jason appeared an hour later. His voice changed when he talked to customers, slick, charming. But the moment the line cleared, he leaned into Ellie, whispered something, and walked away. Ellie's face changed. Like a switch flipped off. She finished her shift, locked her drawer, clocked out. Didn't say goodbye. The next morning, she didn't show. No call. No text. Nothing. Tara shrugged. She's probably done. Couldn't hack it. David felt sick, so he called her. From the burner phone they gave him. Ellie? It's Rick. Just wondering if you're okay. The silence on the line stretched too long. Then, thanks for asking. Not many do. And she hung up. David sat in his motel room for 2 hours staring at the wall. That night, he called the producers. I want to pull the cameras, he said. I need to go in alone. Tomorrow. Why? Because I think something's happening in that store that no one wants filmed. David, if this is illegal, just let me do it. One day. No crew. No wig. I'll tell them I'm corporate. And they agreed. So the next morning, he walked in. Polo shirt. Name badge. Nothing to hide. And that's when he saw her. Back at Register 2. Eyes rimmed red. A man at the counter yelling about a refund. Ellie flinched every time he raised his voice. Jason stood nearby, arms folded, watching like it was a show. David started toward her. And then, she dropped the receipt, whispered an apology, and Jason said it. Said the one thing no boss, no human being, should ever say. God, no wonder your mom off herself. You're just as pathetic. The words landed like a slap. The store went quiet. David's hands clenched. He took a step forward. But before he could speak, Ellie turned, eyes wide, and said something back. Something he didn't expect. Something that stopped everything cold. But what she said wasn't meant for him. It was for Jason. And it changed everything. I have the voicemail. You told me to kill myself. The world held its breath. And David realized this wasn't just about a bad manager. It was about something far worse. And he was right in the middle of it. For a long second, no one moved. The store stood frozen. Customers holding bags, one toddler midwine, even the soft hum of the soda cooler seemed to fade out. David felt every hair on his arm stand up. Ellie didn't blink. She wasn't crying anymore. She was staring straight at Jason. I saved the voicemail, she said again, louder this time. Her voice cracked, but her eyes didn't waver. You told me to kill myself. Do you remember that? Jason's smirk vanished. What? He said. A little laugh. That's ridiculous. But his face was already turning a shade paler. Ellie pulled her phone from her apron, hand trembling. Opened the screen. Started scrolling. David stepped in. Ellie, he said gently. Hey, can I talk to you for a second? She blinked. Looked at him. Recognition sparked. She looked like someone waking from a nightmare. I'm not just a new hire, David said quietly. My name's David Graham. I own this company. Her eyes widened. Her knees gave slightly. He caught her by the elbow before she fell. Jason's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. Wait a minute. What the hell is going on? David didn't look at him. Ellie, do you want to step outside with me? We'll talk. Just us. She hesitated, then nodded. He led her through the automatic doors, past the customers who were pretending not to stare. Once they were outside, the summer air hit like a wave, humid, sticky. A bird chirped somewhere near the dumpster. They stood in a sliver of shade by the cart corral. Thank you, Ellie whispered. You don't need to thank me, David said. You need to tell me everything. She stared at the pavement, a little grease stain in the shape of a heart. Are you going to fire him? She asked. Tell me what happened, he said instead. The whole story, please. So she did. It started 3 months ago, after her mom died. Cancer, fast and cruel. 1 month from diagnosis to the funeral. Ellie stayed in school, picked up more hours at Graham Mart, paid what she could toward the rent on the tiny apartment she and her older brother shared. She didn't complain. She didn't have time to. Jason first started noticing her during inventory night, gave her extra shifts, then started texting her late, work stuff, at first, then jokes, then not jokes, comments about her pretty eyes and how strong she was. At first, she didn't respond. He didn't like that. He started calling her out during team meetings, criticizing small things, her drawer being short by a nickel, forgetting to restock the gum. Tara, the shift lead, followed his lead, called her spacey, fragile, said she needed to toughen up. Ellie tried to keep her head down. She needed the job. One night, Jason cornered her behind the store during trash run. "You look tired," he said. "Better back rub would help." She told him no. Firm, but polite. He leaned in, too close. Told her she should be grateful anyone noticed her. Then he walked away laughing. The next day, she got pulled from the schedule. She asked Tara why. "Jason says you're a liability," she said with a shrug. Then the voicemail came. David could barely breathe by the time she finished. "Do you still have it?" he asked. Ellie nodded. Pulled up her phone again. Hit play. The voice was Jason's. Drunk, maybe. Slurred but unmistakable. "You think you're special," he sneered. "You think anyone gives a damn if you disappear? You're a joke. Just do us all a favor already." David felt like he might be sick. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, finally, "Would you be willing to give that to HR?" Ellie looked at him. "Will it even matter?" He didn't answer that. Not right away. Instead, he reached into his back pocket, pulled out his personal business card, one he almost never handed out, the kind with his direct cell number printed on the back. He pressed it into her hand. "Call this. In 2 hours, you'll have a meeting with our general counsel. Not HR. We'll handle the rest from there." She looked down at the card like it might vanish if she blinked. "Okay," she whispered. Then the door behind them opened. Jason, storming out like he owned the parking lot. "You think you're gonna smear me, Graham? She's a liar. She's been stealing ours. She." David turned to him, eyes cold. "Jason," he said, calm and low. "You're fired. Right now. Walk to your car and leave. If you don't, I'll have security escort you off the property and I will personally call the police." Jason's mouth dropped open. "You can't do that." "I just did." And then he did the one thing David didn't expect. He laughed. "Good luck," Jason spat. "You think this place is bad because of me? You're clueless. You've got rats in every store. You don't even know what's going on under your own damn roof." He turned to Ellie. "This won't stick," he said. "You're nothing. No one's gonna believe a little girl like you." David stepped in front of her. "They don't need to," he said. "I do." Jason scoffed, spun on his heel, and walked to his car. Peeled out of the parking lot like a coward. David turned to Ellie. "You okay?" She nodded, but her lips were pressed tight. "Can I go home?" "Of course." She turned and walked across the lot, slowly, like every step was a mile. David stood there long after she disappeared. Jason's last words still rang in his head. "You think this place is bad because of me?" And suddenly, he realized something that made his gut twist. What if Jason was right? David didn't drive back to his hotel. He drove to the Columbus regional office. It was a squat, 2-story building with tinted windows and a dusty Graham art sign that hadn't been updated in years. The kind of place meant to be ignored. He buzzed in at the side entrance. The receptionist barely looked up until she registered his face. Then she stood. "Mr. Graham? I didn't know you were coming." "I didn't announce it," David said. "Is Colleen in?" "She's on lunch." "Call her." The woman reached for the phone with trembling fingers. David waited by the window, watched the strip mall across the street, saw a teenager flick a cigarette into the gutter, watched it bounce and die. He thought about Ellie, about her hands shaking as she held her phone, about the voicemail, about the way Jason smiled while she cried. Colleen arrived 10 minutes later. Regional director. Smart, polished, MBA, loyal, but guarded, too careful by half. "David," she said, stepping into the waiting room. "This is a surprise. Can we talk in private?" "Of course." Her office was clean and cold. Fake plant in the corner. Whiteboard full of metrics. The air smelled like lemon wipes and stress. David shut the door behind him. "I fired Jason." She blinked. "Okay. May I ask why?" "He's Saturday. You're not going to ask how." Colleen adjusted her blouse, crossed her legs. "Was it performance-related?" David raised an eyebrow. "You tell me. You've worked with him how long?" Colleen hesitated. 5 years. "You trust him?" She looked down. "I trust results." "That's not what I asked." Silence stretched between them. Finally, she sighed. "Jason delivers numbers. He runs tight ships. He pushes people hard. But what?" "I've had complaints. Anonymous ones. About his tone, his presence. But nothing ever formal. Nothing I could move on. David leaned forward. So you heard the alarms. You just didn't pull the cord. She didn't answer. David reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. Set it on the desk between them. What's that? Colleen asked. The voicemail. Colleen didn't touch it. I'm not HR, she said quietly. You're not a stranger, either. You're his superior. Orwell, you had eyes. You had power. Did you ever walk into that store and talk to the cashiers? The shelf stockers? Did you ever ask Ellie how she was doing? She flinched at the name. I didn't know. But you suspected, David said. You felt it. That chill in the room when he walked in. You just didn't want to believe it. Or you didn't think it mattered. He stood. This isn't about covering our asses anymore, Colleen. This is about pulling up the rut. Every store, every layer, every person who thinks they can treat human beings like furniture. She swallowed. What do you want from me? I want a full audit of your district. I want incident reports, turnover rates, exit interview transcripts. I want you to dig like the company depends on it, because it does. And if I find Mo, you won't handle it. I will. Colleen nodded. Slowly. Understood. David left without saying goodbye. That night, in his hotel room, he didn't turn on the TV. He sat on the edge of the bed, tie loosened, staring at his phone. Thinking. Then he dialed. It rang 4 times. Ellie. A pause. Hi. You get home okay? Yeah. My brother's here. He's making Kraft Mac like it's a gourmet dinner. David smiled. Just a little. You got a moment? Yay. I wanted to ask, would you be willing to meet me tomorrow? Somewhere quiet. Just to talk. About Jason. About everything. Another pause. Then, okay. They met the next morning at a diner off Route 62. Cheap coffee, sticky menus, a waitress named Diane who called everyone Han. Ellie looked better. Not good, but better. Like someone who'd finally gotten a full night's sleep. Her hair was tied back. She wore a long-sleeve hoodie despite the heat. They sat in a corner booth. I wasn't sure you'd come, David said. Ellie stirred her tea. I almost didn't. Why did you? She looked out the window. A bus passed. Then, because no one ever came back before. Not once. People say they care, but they don't check in. They don't show up. You did. David nodded, quiet for a second. Ellie, I need to ask you something. And it's a big ask. Okay. I'm going to open an investigation into this district. But more than that, I want to understand what it's like in the stores. Not what the reports say. Not what the managers claim. I want to know how people really feel. How they are really treated. What they are paid. What they are pressured to do. I need someone who's lived it. Who's brave enough to help me see it from the ground. Ellie's spoon clinked against the mug. You want me to spy? No, David said. I want you to speak. You don't have to wear a wire or take notes. Just talk to me. When you're ready. When you see something I should know. You tell me. And I listen. She stared at him. Why me? Because you already did the hardest part, he said. You told the truth when it hurt. Ellie looked down at her tea. Then at him. Okay. And just like that, something shifted. David didn't know it yet, but that one yes, that quiet, tired yes, was going to start an avalanche. One that would take out more than just Jason. Because Jason wasn't the only one. He was just the one who got caught first. The first thing Ellie told him wasn't about herself. It was about Sonia. She's still there, Ellie said, her voice low, picking at a paper napkin while the diner's jukebox played a scratchy Eagles song. Works night shifts. Cleaning crew. No one really talks to her. Jason used to call her the mute. Said she looked like a ghost. David frowned. She ever speak to you? Ellie nodded. Once. Just once. What did she say? Ellie looked up, eyes steady. She said, you should get out of here before he breaks you too. David leaned back in the booth. Let that sit. Is she okay? I don't know, Ellie said. But she's not right. She walks like someone's always behind her. You know that look? That flinch people carry when they've been scared for too long. He did know. Too well. He left the diner with a plan forming. Rough, shapeless, but breathing. He drove to the office, told his assistant to hold all calls, and cleared the rest of the day. Then he pulled up the employee files for store number 108. He found Sonia Henson, 6 years with the company. Originally part-time cleaning staff, later hired full-time with benefits. No complaints filed, no write-ups. Attendance spotless. A ghost on paper. But there was a note. Prefers overnight shift. Minimal interaction. David printed her emergency contact form. No spouse listed. No parents. Just a sister's number, handwritten and faded. He called it. Hello. The voice was cautious, older. Warn. This is David Graham. I'm the CEO of Graham Art. I'm trying to reach Sonia Henson's emergency contact. A long pause. Is she okay? She is. But I'm hoping to speak with her. About her experience at our store. Another silence. Then, she won't talk to you. Not unless she trusts you. And she doesn't trust much anymore. Can I meet her? The woman hesitated. She still works nights. Yes. Then show up. But don't expect a warm welcome. That night, he did. He waited until 11:45, parked across from store number 108, and watched. At 12:07, the side door cracked open. A slim woman in a janitor's uniform stepped out, dragging 2 tied-up trash bags behind her. She moved slowly, carefully, head low, arms stiff. David got out of the car and approached. Sonia. She turned fast, backed up. Her hand went to her hip, not quite defensive, just ready. Who are you? He raised his hands. David Graham. I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to talk. She stared at him, jaw tight. You're the boss. I am. She squinted like she didn't believe him. Why would you be here? I met someone, he said gently. Ellie. She said you warned her. I think you saw what Jason was doing a long time ago. I think you tried to survive it. I want to hear your story. You don't have to tell me everything. Just what you want. Her eyes narrowed. You trying to fix something? Yes. Why now? Because I should have fixed it before, David said. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, 10 minutes. Then I go back in. They sat on 2 overturned milk crates behind the store, the smell of stale grease drifting from the dumpster nearby. Sonia didn't talk like a victim. She talked like a veteran. Jason came in cocky, she said. Always thought he was God's gift. At first he just ignored me. I didn't mind. Then he started noticing. Little jabs. You married. You smile like you're hiding something. Just garbage. Then he started showing up on nights he didn't need to be here. Hung around the loading dock. Once, I found him in the break room, waiting. Said he just wanted to talk. She took a sip from a water bottle. Shook her head. I told HR twice. You know what they said. David already knew. But he asked anyway. What? They said there's no security footage to prove it. And since I didn't have physical evidence of harassment, they couldn't escalate. Told me to change shifts if I was uncomfortable. David said nothing. Sonia looked him in the eye. So I stopped filing complaints. Started wearing my earbuds all night. Started keeping mace in my boot. That's how you survive in your company, Mr. Graham. He felt something inside him sink. Not anymore, he said quietly. She looked unconvinced. I want to make this right, David continued. Not just with Jason. With everything. I want your help. Not just as a witness, but as someone who knows how this all works. What people hide. What they suffer through. Sonia laughed once. Bitter. You want to hire me. I want to listen to you. She looked at him. For a moment, she was quiet. Then she said, I'll give you stories, Graham. 1 a week. From me. From others. No names. You want the truth? You'd better be ready to hear it. He nodded. I am. By the end of the week, Ellie had filed a formal report. The legal team was building a case. Jason's company email was pulled. More complaints surfaced, 2 from other stores. 1 dating back 4 years. But what David didn't expect was the call from Colleen. David, she said, her voice tight. You need to see this. She forwarded an internal memo. It came from a different district. Same state. Different manager. The subject line, about that girl from store 108. David clicked. It was a thread. 4 managers talking about Ellie. talking about her drama, calling her a risk, sharing Jason's exact words, mocking her, saying she'd bring down morale. One of them had CC'd a corporate VP. The VP had replied, "Keep her quiet, or cut her loose." David stared at the screen, and for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a boss. He felt like he was sitting at the top of something rotten, and it was time to burn it down. David didn't sleep that night. The memo haunted him. That last line, "Keep her quiet, or cut her loose," felt like a knife hidden in a handshake. It wasn't just about Jason anymore. This was bigger, deeper. Someone at his corporate, knew, and instead of stopping it, they protected it. He was starting to see it clearly. Jason wasn't the virus. He was just a symptom. The infection had spread higher, wider, quietly, professionally. Smiling faces with sharpened teeth. At 6:15 a.m., David parked outside Graham headquarters in Dayton. The building looked the same as always, gray glass, stiff landscaping, rows of cars lined up neat. But now it felt different, like walking into a church and realizing God hadn't been there for a long time. He headed straight for the executive floor. The receptionist blinked when she saw him. No appointment, no assistant, no coffee in hand. Just David, in jeans and a flannel shirt, eyes hard. "Is Michelle in?" he asked. Michelle Westbrook, VP of Human Resources. 20 years with the company. Smart, composed, practically ran the place when David was off-site. He used to trust her like a second brain. The receptionist hesitated. She just got in. "I'll wait." She buzzed the line. Michelle answered after 2 rings. A beat later, her door opened down the hall. "David," she said, all business smile. "This early? We need to talk." "Of course. Come in." The office was sleek, cold, full of awards. She gestured to a chair. David didn't sit. He pulled out his phone, opened the memo, set it on her desk. "Read it." She looked down. Her expression shifted. First confusion, then discomfort, then something close to anger. But not the kind he was hoping for. Not the righteous kind. "Where did you get this?" David ignored the question. "You know what this means, Michelle." "I think someone was venting. That thread was internal. It was a conversation about destroying a girl's life to protect one of our own," he snapped. They knew what Jason was. They knew Michelle. And not only did they do nothing, they encouraged the silence. "And you want me to believe that's just venting?" She leaned back, crossed her arms. "This is an HR matter, David. We've handled worse. We can do a quiet investigation." "No." That stopped her. "No," she echoed. "This doesn't stay quiet," he said. "Not this time. I want every name, every store, every file where complaints went missing or got buried. And I want the people who protected predators out of my company. Today." Michelle didn't blink. "I don't think you understand what kind of precedent that sets." "I don't care about precedent," David said. "I care about Ellie, and Sonia, and whoever else we failed." Michelle looked at him for a long moment. Then, carefully, "If you go scorched earth on this, we'll lose face. We'll lose the board's confidence. Stock could drop. Public trust could implode. You could lose this company, David." He met her gaze, calm and steady, then let it burn. By noon, a task force was formed. Not in HR, not legal. David built it himself, 5 employees he trusted from the early days. People who still believed in the mission. People who remembered why Graham existed in the first place. They operated out of a locked conference room 2 floors below. By 2 o'clock, they had 20 flagged employees under review. At 3:40, Ellie walked into that room. David had asked her to help. Not as a victim, as a witness, a voice. She stepped in quiet, a little stiff, like she was still expecting to be punished for just existing. But when she saw the board, covered in names, strings of notes, sticky tabs, and red pins, her breath caught. "You're really doing it," she said. David nodded. "We are." Then she pointed to a name on the far corner. "A manager in Cleveland." "I've heard things," she said. He used to call the girls interns. But there were no internships. The room went still. David turned to her. "Would you be willing to tell us everything?" Ellie swallowed, then nodded. "I remember it all." That night, Colleen called again. Her voice was sharp now. Focused. I pulled the files like you asked. David, this goes back years. How far? Far enough that I'm sick to my stomach. Give me names. I'm still sorting. But there's one you need to know about right now. Graham Mart number 47, in Cincinnati. The store manager, Riley Barnes. He was transferred after a complaint in 2017. Transferred? David asked. Not fired? Nope. Moved to a bigger store. Promoted 6 months later. Whoever flagged that complaint, their exit interview is missing. David stood up from his desk, started pacing. Do we know who that was? Colleen hesitated. I think so. I cross-checked payroll. Her name's Claire Monroe. Where is she now? She quit the week after Riley's transfer. No record since. David opened a drawer, grabbed a pen, scribbled the name. Find her, he said, already trying. But David. What? Colleen's voice lowered. If what I'm seeing is real, this wasn't just a few bad managers. This was policy. Unwritten, but deliberate. I think there was a whole system for burying complaints. David closed his eyes. He saw the smiling faces on the company brochure, the happy slogans on billboards, the internal slogans about family and support. Lies. All of it. Lies printed in high-gloss ink. He opened his eyes. Then we blow up the system. At 8:43 p.m., David was back in his motel room. Lights off. Laptop glowing. An email draft sat open on the screen. Subject: to everyone who works at Graham Mart. The cursor blinked. He stared at it a long time. Then he began to type. I built this company 23 years ago with a simple goal: to treat people better than the places that came before. Somewhere along the way, we lost that. You trusted us to protect you. We didn't. And I'm sorry. That changes now. Starting tomorrow, I will be opening every channel, publicly and privately, for employees to come forward. Without fee. Without retaliation. You will be heard. And if you were harmed, we will act. If you protected predators, covered for them, or let silence be your shield, you will be removed. No matter your title. No matter your seniority. We are not going to patch this. We are going to rebuild it from the ground up. We owe you that. And I owe you that. David Graham. He hovered over the send button, then clicked. He sat back, hands shaking. Outside, the motel sign flickered. Inside, the fire had already started. The email went out at 9:01 p.m. By 9:07, the first reply came in. Subject line, thank you. By midnight, there were 147 more. Some were one-liners. I thought no one would ever say it. I have something to report. Where do I start? I was Ellie once, but no one saw me. Others were long. Pages, in some cases. Stories typed out in shaking fingers, some from burner emails, some from old Gmail accounts created just for this moment. By morning, over 300 had arrived. By the end of the week, there were 4,712. David read every one. He stopped sleeping. Ate when he remembered. Cried twice. Quietly. Once in the office bathroom at 3 a.m. and again in his car outside store number 19, where a cashier had written about the time she was groped in the supply closet and told she misread the situation. Ellie was reading them too. She and Sonia had started coming in 3 days a week, sitting in that same task force room, highlighting emails, flagging the urgent ones, organizing details no one else would know to look for. By Friday, the room was covered in color-coded sheets and named clusters, some familiar, some long buried. That's when they found the list. It came from a whistleblower in Tulsa, a former district supervisor. He sent it anonymously, subject line, I kept this, because I knew someday I'd need to. Attached was an internal spreadsheet from 2019. It wasn't labeled clearly, but it didn't need to be. Each row was a store number, a manager name, and a 3-letter code. L, GRY, CHRSTR. No legend, no key, but one thing stood out. Every manager marked GRY had been accused, at some point, of misconduct, sexual harassment, intimidation, retaliation. Some were still employed. David stared at the screen, cold crawling through his chest. He asked the room, what do you think GRY stands for? Ellie didn't hesitate. Gray area. she said. Sonia nodded. Not fired. Just moved. David leaned back, numb. They'd created a system for labeling predators. Not to deal with them. To track them internally and move them around. Like assets. By Monday morning, David called an emergency meeting with the board. He didn't ask. He informed. 10 men and women in suits gathered in the top-floor conference room, sipping coffee, expecting a PR briefing, maybe a damage control strategy. What they got was a war plan. David stood at the head of the table. No PowerPoint, no legal counsel, just a man who looked like he'd crawled through fire. This isn't a leak, he said. It's a reckoning. He passed around printed copies of the list. Red marks, notes, attached stories, names, dates. One of the board members, an older man named Harris, frowned. We can't possibly verify all this. We don't have to, David said. We already knew. Murmurs. A few heads bowed. David went on. This wasn't neglect. It was deliberate. We built a machine that filtered out decency and rewarded control. We covered for predators and punished the people who spoke up. And now we pay for that. A woman down the table raised a brow. And what do you propose? We fire everyone who's ever been accused. No, David said. We investigate every case. Thoroughly. And if we find that someone protected abusers, silenced reports, or covered it up, then we fire them. Publicly. Another board member shook his head. You realize what that does to our brand? Our stock? David's voice didn't shake. If we're lucky, it burns it to the ground. Silence. Then Harris asked, so what's the endgame here? David looked at him, straight in the eye. The endgame is that someday a girl like Ellie walks into one of our stores and never has to wonder if she's safe. That's it. That's all. No one spoke. Then, slowly, one hand clapped, then another, and another, until the room echoed with quiet, decisive applause. That week, 12 executives were placed on leave. 4 district managers resigned before their names were even confirmed. One store manager was arrested after Sonia's testimony triggered a reopened police case from 2018. The press caught wind. At first, it was cautious headlines. CEO of Graham Mart responds to alleged harassment scandal. Then the harder ones. Company knew. Internal labels used to track misconduct. David went on national TV. Sat across from reporters who didn't smile. Who didn't play softball. And he answered every question. Yes, I'm responsible. No, I didn't know. But I should have. Yes, we're tearing it all down. When asked what he'd say to the victims, he said, I'm sorry, and I believe you. That clip went viral. And just like that, the tone shifted. Not because people forgot what had happened, but because someone finally said it out loud. At store number 108, Ellie returned to register 2 for the first time in weeks. This time, she wasn't trembling. She stood behind the counter like it was hers. A mother in line whispered, You're the one from the news, right? And Ellie nodded, awkward. The woman smiled. My daughter saw your story. Said she wants to work here now. Ellie blinked. Really? Yeah. Said you're the first grown-up who made her feel like it's okay to speak up. Ellie looked down at the register. The chip buttons. The old scanner. Then she looked up. Tell her we're hiring. That night, David drove back to his first store. Graham Mart number 1. Dayton. Still open. Still small. Still with that busted neon flicker on the left side of the sign. He stood in the parking lot alone. 23 years ago, he dreamed this company would help people. Somewhere along the way, it forgot how. But maybe, not all of it was lost. Maybe this was the rebuild. Brick by brick. Not perfect, but real. He pulled out his phone. Checked the inbox. There was a new message. From someone named Claire Monroe. I've been waiting a long time for someone to ask what happened. I'm ready to talk now. Clay. David stared at the screen, then smiled. Claire Monroe lived in a small town east of Cincinnati, in a ranch-style house with peeling shutters and a cracked driveway. David drove out himself. No press, no security, no assistant. Just him and a plain rental car. He didn't want to call first. He didn't want to give her time to change her mind. Or worse, talk herself out of it. He knew the kind of silence that builds after years of being ignored. The longer it sits, the heavier it gets. She answered the door, wearing a flannel pajama top and jeans. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun. Early 30s, sharp-eyed, guarded. "You came," she said. "I did." Claire stepped aside. "You want coffee?" "I'd like that." Her living room was modest, clean, lived in. A framed photo on the wall caught David's eye. Her, younger, standing in front of a grey mart, red vest, lanyard badge, arms crossed like she was ready to run the place. "That was your first store?" he asked. "Store 47, she said. "Manager thought the vest made me look like a baby target. But I liked it." She handed him a mug. "No creamer, just bitter black. You know why I messaged you, right?" "I was hoping you'd tell me," David said. Claire didn't sit. She stood by the window, arms crossed, "because for years I thought I was crazy." She glanced at him. "And you saying what you said on TV, that maybe we weren't the problem, it made me want to say it out loud." David waited. Claire exhaled slowly, then walked over to a drawer in her desk, pulled out a manila envelope and handed it to him. Inside were printed emails, screenshots, a statement she had written and rewritten 10 times. "It's all there," she said. "Everything Riley Barnes did. How he talked to me. What he said when I told him no. And what happened when I finally reported it." David flipped through the pages. There were timestamps, exact quotes. Riley had cornered her after a shift in the loading dock. Told her she was too cute to be in retail forever. Asked her if she wanted to move up the ladder faster. When she said no, he told her she was replaceable. 2 days later, her hours were cut in half. 1 week later, she was transferred to night stocking. No notice. 2 weeks later, she quit. "I gave this to HR, Claire said. "They told me it would be handled internally." "It wasn't," David said. "No," Claire agreed. "It really wasn't." He looked up at her. "Would you be willing to go on record now?" She hesitated. "Like, public?" "Yes, not just in our files. In the lawsuit." Claire blinked. "There's a lawsuit." "There will be." Claire nodded slowly. "Yay. Okay, I'll testify. But not for me. For the next girl who walks into one of your stores and thinks she's not allowed to say no." That afternoon, David called the legal team. "Get her in," he said. "Full immunity from retaliation. Put her on the record." Then he called Colleen. "Find everything you can on Riley Barnes. I want his hiring manager, his references, any other stores he worked in. Dig deep." Colleen didn't hesitate anymore. "I'm already on it," she said. That same night, Ellie was sitting in the task force room with Sonia, reviewing new reports. The board had hired 3 outside investigators now. David had insisted. Neutral. Clean. Nothing internal. He didn't want this turning into another PR move. He wanted names. Truth. Accountability. Ellie looked tired, but her posture had changed over the past few weeks. Shoulders back. Chin lifted. She had weight behind her now. She belonged in that room, and everyone knew it. She tapped her highlighter against one printed email. "This one's big," she said. "Store 72. Manager forced an employee to fake injury reports. Told her if she didn't say she fell, they'd pin it on her and fire her." Sonia raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Ellie slid the report across the table. "Turns out the employee's injuries came from trying to stop him from cornering her in the back room." Sonia exhaled. "Jesus." Ellie stood, grabbed a thumbtack, and pinned the report to the red section of the board, active threats. They didn't use legal language in the war room. No HR speak. No branding fluff. Just 3 sections. Survivors. Abusers. Threats. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest. At 3 a.m., David couldn't sleep. He opened his laptop, checked the inbox. A new email had come in, from an address he didn't recognize. No subject line. He opened it. "Heard you're cleaning house. Don't forget the people who let Jason in the door. Start with Scott Morrigan." He knew. He always knew. Attached was a file. A scanned image of an old internal memo. 2015. To Scott Morrigan. From HR East Region. Subject, Concerns about Jason Merrill, Store 93. The text was short. Brutal. "I understand your discomfort with Merrill's leadership style. However, until we receive formal legal complaints, I recommend we let this play out. Here's a producer. Let's not rock the boat." David stared at it, cold washing over him. He knew Scott, SVP of Operations, still employed, still sitting on the weekly calls, still smiling in meetings like nothing ever touched him. And he knew. The next morning, David walked into the executive conference room 10 minutes early. Scott was there, sipping his coffee, chatting with two department heads. David didn't sit. He dropped the printed memo on the table in front of him. Scott glanced down. His face didn't change. He just stared at the paper, then looked up. "We need to talk," David said. Scott set the coffee down, calm as ever. "Guess we do." And David knew, right then, this was no longer just about store managers or district supervisors or one bad apple in Columbus. This went all the way to the top, and it was time to pull every last root out of the ground. Scott Morrigan didn't blink, didn't fidget, didn't shift in his chair. He looked up from the printed memo with the kind of quiet ease that only came from years of never being questioned. He said, "That's 10 years old." David didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, like a teacher about to hand out a failing grade. "And it still reeks," David replied. "You saw a red flag and shelved it. That's not age. That's right." Scott folded the memo neatly. He set it aside like a grocery receipt. "We had no formal complaint. You know how that works." David stepped closer. "Don't do that. Don't give me the handbook language. You knew Jason was dangerous and you passed him off to another district like he was a broken barcode scanner." Scott didn't argue. He smiled. "You've always been the moral guy, David. The one with the origin story. The old store. The warehouse floors. But eventually, you climbed too. And when you got tired, someone else handled the mess. I was that someone." David stared at him. "You're telling me this is your version of cleaning up?" Scott leaned back, folding his hands across his stomach. "I kept you out of the mud. I took the hit so you could be the face. Every business has its shadows. You don't make it to 100 stores without someone burying a few skeletons. I did what was necessary." "No," David said. "You did what was easy. Necessary would have meant facing the fallout. Necessary would have meant standing up for people like Ellie and Sonia before they broke." Scott shrugged. They were replaceable. The words rang out louder than anything Jason had said. David stared at him for one breath, two. Then he turned toward the door and opened it. "Security is waiting downstairs. Your company credentials are already deactivated. You're terminated. Effective now." Scott stood. Not angrily. Calm. Smug, even. "This place will fall apart without me. I'd rather rebuild from scratch than keep your fingerprints on the walls," David said. Scott paused in the doorway, glanced at the others filing in for the meeting. Then, with a small, bitter laugh, he said, "You think you're fixing something, David, but all you're doing is putting cracks in your foundation." David watched him go, then said to the room, "That foundation was already cracked. I'm just letting the light in." Later that afternoon, David met with Ellie and Sonia in the now infamous war room. He told them everything. About Scott. About the memo. About how far it went up. Sonia leaned forward, arms braced on the table. "So who else is dirty?" David didn't dodge. "I don't know. Not yet. But we're going to find out." Ellie glanced at the board. The pins. The notes. The growing cluster of yellow tags near the top, executive oversight. "I used to think the worst thing in the world was someone hurting you," she said. "Now I think maybe it's someone seeing it happen and deciding it wasn't their problem." David sat down across from her. "That's the kind of company we were," he said. "It's not the one we're going to be." Sonia arched an eyebrow. "You really think people are going to trust that?" "No," David said. "Not right away. Maybe not for years. But we'll learn it. One person at a time." Ellie looked at him. "I want to go back," she said suddenly. "To store 108. She shook her head. "No, I want to go further. I want to go into stores. Talk to the people who won't email you. The ones who don't trust HR or hotlines. The ones like me." David studied her. "You want to be a field investigator?" "No," she said. "I want to be the one who shows up when they think no one's coming." 2 days later, Ellie got her badge. Ellie Hartwell, Employee Advocate, Office of Accountability. Not some corporate title. Not a token role. A real position. Reporting directly to David. With full clearance. Sonia joined her a week later. Together, they became the faces of a new department. They visited stores quietly, spoke to night crews and cashiers and janitors on break. They listened more than they talked. They took notes. They looked people in the eye. And little by little, people started opening up. One woman handed Ellie a worn journal she'd kept for years, filled with notes about her manager's comments and times she'd been followed to her car. A stock boy in Indiana broke down crying in the break room, saying no one had ever believed him when he said the assistant manager slapped him. Ellie didn't promise justice. She promised action. Back in Dayton, David sat in his office watching the company he'd built transform. For the first time in a long time, he felt proud. Not of the buildings, not the earnings calls or shareholder meetings, but of the people, the ones still standing, the ones who came forward, the ones who decided silence wasn't the safest choice anymore. Then one night, just before locking up, David's phone buzzed. A number he didn't recognize. He answered. "Mr. Graham," a voice said. "Young. Nervous. This is David. I'm calling because I heard you're listening now." David leaned forward. "I am." The voice trembled. "Then I need to tell you what happened at store 76. David picked up a pen. "Go ahead," he said. "I'm here." The voice on the line sounded like it belonged to a kid. Couldn't have been more than 19, maybe 20. Male. Shaky. "My name's Tyler," he said. I worked at store 76 up in Akron. Stock shift. Overnight crew." David sat at his desk, pen ready. "I'm listening." "It started about 8 months ago. My manager, Rick Garvey, he'd do this thing where he'd ask people to stay after shift just for a quick chat. But it was never quick, and it was never just talking." David's hand stopped moving. "What happened?" "Tyler. He blocked the door, asked questions about my body. Once, he said I should flex more when customers walk past. That it'd help with tips, except we don't get tips. Then one night, he locked the door, told me no one was coming for at least an hour. Said if I didn't want to lose hours, I should at least pretend to like the attention." David closed his eyes, jaw tight. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I quit the next day," Tyler went on, voice cracking now. "I told HR. I wrote it all down. I begged someone to call me back. They never did. 2 weeks later, my friend, Brandon, he got assigned to the same shift." David opened his eyes. "Did something happen to him too?" Tyler hesitated. "He's dead, sir. 3 months ago. They called it a fentanyl overdose. But he'd been clean for over a year. He had 6 months sober. And the week before he died, he told me he couldn't take the job anymore. That it felt like that guy followed him home in his head." David didn't speak. There was nothing to say that could make this better. But he made a promise to himself, right then, that Brandon's name would not be another lost line in a report somewhere. "You said your manager's name was Rick Garvey." "Yay." David jotted it down. "Do you know if he's still working there?" "Far as I know, yeah. No one touched him." David's voice sharpened. "That's about to change." By the time he hung up, it was past 11 p.m. He called Colleen directly. "I need everything you can find on Rick Garvey. Store 76, Akron." "I'm on it," she said, no hesitation. "Pull old HR tickets. Past complaints. Exit interview logs." She paused. "You think it's another cover-up?" "I don't think," David said. "I know." The next morning, Colleen sent a report to David's private inbox. The subject line was simple. "Garvey, it's worse than we thought." David opened the file. There were 3 flagged reports on Garvey from the past 4 years, all from overnight employees. All contained similar language, inappropriate comments, unwanted contact, feels unsafe. Every report had the same resolution, no formal action taken due to insufficient evidence. But one note caught David's attention. A comment from an HR rep buried at the bottom of a complaint summary. "Employee seems emotionally unstable, possibly retaliating after receiving scheduling changes." They blamed the victim. David stood so fast his chair rolled back. He called Colleen again. "We're going to Akron," he said. Ellie and Sonia met them there the next day. Store 76 was in a fading plaza with cracked pavement and sun-bleached banners advertising 2-for-1 energy drinks. The front windows were taped in places. The inside was whouse, dim lights, a sour smell, and an unmistakable layer of tension hanging in the air. David asked to speak with the store manager. Rick Garvey walked out of the back room with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Thick neck, tan from a bottle, collared shirt stretched too tight. "Didn't expect corporate today," he said, shaking David's hand a little too firmly. "What can I help you with?" David didn't return the smile. "We're here to talk about employee conduct." Rick didn't blink. "Okay. Anything specific?" "Yes," David said. "You." The shift changed instantly. Rick's smile vanished. "Excuse me." Ellie stepped forward. "You remember Tyler?" Rick squinted. "Nope. Doesn't ring a bell." "Brandon?" Sonia added. "Nothing." David reached into his coat pocket and handed over a copy of Tyler's complaint, one that HR had never responded to. Rick took it, glanced down. For a moment, something flickered across his face, recognition. But it was gone fast. "This is bullshit," he said. "Then you won't mind stepping away from the store while we investigate," David replied. "You can't do that. You have no proof." "I don't need proof," David said. "I need reason. And we have it." Rick opened his mouth again, some protest, some threat, but stopped short when two security officers stepped inside. Quiet, calm, hands near their radios. David turned to them. "Escort Mr. Garvey off the property. His access has already been disabled." Rick tried to bluster. "This is illegal. I'll sue. You'll regret this." But it was weak, empty. His voice shook at the edges. He didn't fight. He didn't resist. Because deep down, he knew the house of cards had fallen. Outside the store, David stood in the hot sun and called Tyler. "Rick's out," he said. "He won't be coming back." There was silence on the line. Then, "Thank you." David waited. "I thought no one cared," Tyler added, almost in a whisper. "We do now," David said. That night, David met Ellie and Sonia for dinner at a quiet diner on the edge of town. They didn't talk shop. They didn't talk policy. They talked life. Ellie was thinking about going back to school. Social work, maybe. Or law. Sonia was writing a blog. Quietly. Anonymously. Just stories. Reflections. The kind of writing you do when you need to let things bleed out. At one point, Sonia looked at David and said, "You know what this is, right?" "What?" She tapped the table. "This is what rebuilding looks like. Not the headlines. Not the lawsuits. This. The small stuff. The human stuff." David nodded. He'd spent years in spreadsheets. On stages. Inside boardrooms. But she was right. This. Two women who had once been afraid to speak, now sitting across from him, strong and steady. That was the real progress. That was the proof. And he wasn't done yet. It was just past 6 a.m. when the call came. David was in his office, watching the sun rise over Dayton through a fogged window, sipping coffee that had gone cold. He wasn't surprised the call came early. These days, the worst ones always did. Colleen's voice was tight. "We've got a problem." David straightened. "Tell me." Someone leaked the investigation list. Everything in him went still. "To the press?" "No, to them." She paused. "The list with the names of every employee under internal review? It's all over an anonymous employee forum. Screenshots, red markings, store numbers. It's out there." David stood up. "When?" "About an hour ago." He was already moving, throwing on his jacket, grabbing his keys. "How bad is it?" "We've had 8 resignation emails in the last 40 minutes. One manager from Louisville is already deleting store emails. It's trying to lock him out now." "Shut everything down," David said. "Email, Slack, the forum, any platform where info's moving." "I already did," Colleen said. "But that's not the biggest issue." David froze at the door. "What is?" "There's a name on that list that shouldn't be there." David turned, slowly. "Whose?" She hesitated. "Ellie." He drove faster than he should have, barely noticed the speed limit signs. By the time he got to the war room, the air felt like pressure, too thick, too quiet. Ellie was already there, standing in front of the whiteboard. She was staring at her own name, circled in red. David stepped in. "I didn't know," she said before he could speak. Her voice wasn't angry, just hollow. "You put me under review." "I didn't," David said. "I swear, that list was never meant to have your name." She didn't move. Then how did it get there? David looked at Colleen, who stood in the corner with a laptop open and a pinched expression. We traced the file history, she said. It was altered last week. Someone added 5 names. Ellie turned. Who? Colleen's eyes dropped. Michelle Westbrook. HR. The woman who smiled through everything. The one David had trusted to handle things right when this all began. Ellie let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. Of course. I'm pulling her in, David said. No, Ellie said. Her voice had steel now. I will. Michelle showed up 20 minutes later, heels clicking against the tile like she was walking a runway. She stepped into the war room like it was still hers. Ellie didn't flinch. You put my name on a list of predators. Michelle barely blinked. I was following procedure. No, you were following a habit, Ellie said. One you've had for years. Punish the voice, protect the system. Michelle opened her mouth. David cut in. You altered a legal document, Michelle, and you leaked it. I didn't leak anything, she said calmly. Someone in my department must have accessed it after hours. Ellie folded her arms. And why was my name there in the first place? Michelle shrugged, still playing the game. You were recently promoted. In the interest of transparency. Bullshit, David said, stepping forward. You tried to discredit her. You hoped people would see that list and assume she was a fraud. That the entire movement was. And when it exploded, you'd be the one to step in and say, see, this is what happens when we let things get emotional. Michelle didn't respond. David took a deep breath. You're terminated. Effective immediately. Legal will follow up within the hour. Do not contact anyone on this team again. Michelle's face was stone as she turned and left. No words. No apology. That afternoon, Ellie sat alone in the conference room, staring at the war board. The place where her name had been circled now stood blank. Wiped clean. David stepped in with 2 coffees. Black, like regret, he joked. Ellie half smiled. Took the cup. He sat beside her. You okay? She nodded, slowly. It's not that they tried to take me down, she said. It's that for a second, I believe they could. David looked down at his cup. They've had a lot of practice. Not anymore. They sat in silence for a while. Then David asked, do you still want this? The work? I mean, after all this. Ellie looked at him. Her eyes were clear, more than ever. That evening, a small press conference was called. No flash. No marketing, just a folding table, a MIC, and a statement. Ellie read it. Not a lawyer, not a PR rep, just her. She stood at the front of the room and told the truth. About Jason. About Michelle. About the broken chain that wrapped around every store like a leash. And then she said this. This company didn't fall apart overnight. It cracked over years. Tiny breaks caused by people who looked the other way, who decided fear was easier than change. We're not asking for perfection now. We're asking for courage. One person, one voice, at a time. The room was still. No clapping. No reporters shouting. Just silence. The good kind. The kind that means people were listening. The next morning, David got a letter. Handwritten. No return address. Dear Mr. Graham, I used to work in Store 41. I never filed a report. But I wanted to. Every day. For 6 months. But I was 17. I thought it would ruin my life. You didn't save me. Not then. But you're saving someone else now. That matters. Thank you. David folded the letter and tucked it in his desk drawer. Not because he wanted to hide it. Because he wanted to carry it with him. Every day from now on. As a reminder. The cost of silence. And the weight of change. The letters didn't stop. They came in manila envelopes, folded notebook paper, postcards without return addresses. Some were emailed from burner accounts. Others were handwritten in block letters like the senders were trying to forget how their own handwriting felt. David read them all. One from a 45-year-old woman in Iowa who said she still couldn't walk into a discount store without checking over her shoulder. One from a single dad in Tennessee who said his son was the only reason he didn't drive off a bridge after what his district manager said to him behind the locked supply cage. And one from a former night shift worker who simply wrote, I told my story once and no one believed me. You don't know what it means to watch people finally get heard. David kept the letters in a locked drawer under his desk, in a plain box labeled only with a sticker. Truth. At the end of that week, Colleen pulled together a report. One David had requested a month earlier but knew would take time. She laid it on his desk without a word. The top page read, Graham Mart Internal Investigation, Final Findings. Confidential, CEO review only. He opened it. 31 confirmed predator complaints substantiated. 114 reports previously ignored or dismissed now reopened. 9 cases referred to local law enforcement. 4 wrongful termination suits filed, all now being settled. 18 executives, managers, or HR leads either resigned or were removed. He sat back in his chair, let it all sink in. And still, a line near the bottom hit him harder than the rest. Number of victims who had never filed a formal complaint, 293. Almost 300 people who never even raised their hands. Because they believed no one would listen. Because, for years, they were right. David closed the folder. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt responsible. Ellie knocked once and stepped into his office. Colleen sent the numbers. She said, I just finished. She looked tired. The kind of tired you carry in your bones. But she was standing tall. Sonia and I are heading to Store 12 tomorrow. David raised an eyebrow. That's out in the hills, right? Ellie nodded. Rural. Isolated. They've had 4 managers in 5 years. Never the same one more than 6 months. Sounds like a place where a lot can hide. That's the point. He nodded. You want backup? No, she said. But if I call, answer. I always do. She smiled, just barely, then turned to go. Before she left, she paused at the door. Do you ever feel like this is bigger than we can handle? David didn't answer right away. Then he said, all the time. Ellie nodded like she expected that. But, he added, we're not supposed to handle it all. Just our part. And maybe if enough people do their part, the whole thing moves. That night, David stayed late. The office lights hummed softly around him. He pulled out his phone and opened the message thread labeled Field Dispatch. It was a private thread. Him, Ellie, Sonia, Colleen, and 2 others on the internal task force. He typed, Update. Internal report closed. Phase 1 complete. Thank you all. Tomorrow, we start Phase 2. There are more voices. More stories. And we're not done listening. He hit send. The replies came in slow, but steady. From Colleen. Still in. From Sonia. 1 name at a time. 1 store at a time. From Ellie. I'm ready. Let's go find them. David leaned back in his chair. Outside, the city was quiet. Soft wind stirred trees that lined the sidewalk. Neon signs buzzed in the distance. He remembered when he opened the first store. He remembered loading toilet paper onto shelves himself. Arguing with a vendor over 2 cents per unit. Staying after close to sweep because the night janitor called out. He'd thought that was the hard part. But this was the real work. Not building shelves. Restoring trust. The next morning, Ellie and Sonia pulled into the lot of Store 12 just after 8 a.m. The town was quiet. No traffic lights. Just 1 long road in, 1 long road out. Ellie stepped out of the car, squinted into the sun. The store looked normal. That's what worried her. Inside, she introduced herself. Flashed a badge. The shift lead, a wiry man in his 50s with a fading name tag, looked nervous. I thought you folks already came through. This is a follow-up, she said. Is your store manager here? He nodded toward the back. Is in his office. What's his name? Trent Carver. She paused. That name wasn't in the file. Wasn't in any file. She turned to Sonia, who frowned. Something's off, Ellie said. She walked to the back of the store. Past the frozen aisle. Past the end cap of plastic bins marked down for summer clearance. She knocked on the office door. A pause. Then, yay! She opened it. Inside, a man stood behind a desk littered with shipping labels and half-eaten sunflower seeds. Trent Carver. Tall. Lean. Clean-cut. But something about him felt slippery. Like he was always 5 seconds from smiling at the wrong time. Ellie held out her badge. Ellie Hartwell. Office of Accountability. He looked at it. Then at her. Smiled. Didn't expect you so soon. Ellie froze. He knew who she was. Before she said anything else, he added, Tell me, did Tyler send you? And just like that, the whole room changed. Ellie's breath caught. She stared at Trent Carver, that name still echoing in her mind. Tyler never mentioned him. But this man, the way he said, "Did Tyler send you?" Like it was a joke, like it was cute, like he had nothing to lose. Ellie had seen that kind of smirk before. On Jason. On Garvey. On every man who thought his silence was more permanent than his damage. She didn't smile. "No," she said slowly. "But you just gave me a reason to talk to him again." Trent leaned back against his desk, arms crossed, casually chewing on a sunflower seed like they were just two co-workers catching up. "You corporate types don't get how things really work in stores like this," he said. "People here don't want a policy. They want a paycheck. We give them that, they shut up and clock out." Sonia had slipped in behind Ellie, silent but watchful. Ellie stepped into the office, let the door swing shut behind her. "So," she said, "why don't you tell me what really goes on in this store, Trent?" Trent's face changed just slightly, a twitch in his jaw. "You here to make me look bad?" "I don't have to," Ellie said. "You're doing that fine on your own." Sonia moved toward the file cabinet in the corner. "Mind if I look through these?" "They are locked," Trent snapped. "Cool," Sonia said. "We brought bolt cutters." Trent shifted. For the first time, he looked uneasy. Just a flash. Ellie stepped closer to the desk. Her tone changed. Lower now. Controlled. "We know your last 3 stores reported high turnover. We know every woman on night crew here has lasted less than a month. And we know at least one complaint about you disappeared last year. A cashier named Maya, she transferred out and stopped replying to HR." Trent smirked again, but this one didn't have the same weight. Maybe she just didn't like the work. Ellie didn't blink. Or maybe you gave her a reason to be scared. The room went quiet. David had told her once, sometimes you don't win by yelling. You win by refusing to look away. So she didn't. She let the moment stretch. And eventually, Trent broke it. "You can't prove anything." "You're right," Ellie said. "But Maya can." Back in the car, Ellie called David. "He knew Tyler," she said. "He said his name like a day." David's voice tightened on the line. "You think this is bigger than we thought?" "I think we haven't even scratched the surface." David was quiet for a moment. Then, "We'll pull his file. HR, payroll, call logs, all of it. If he touched one more person, I want to know." Ellie hesitated. "There's something else." "What?" "I think he's proud of it." David didn't answer at first. Then, low and tired, they usually are. By nightfall, the legal team had frozen Trent Carver's company accounts. He was suspended pending investigation. But Ellie wasn't done. She called Tyler, told him what Trent said. Tyler went quiet on the line. Then, very softly, he was one of the others. "What others?" "There wasn't just Jason," Tyler said. "Jason was loud. Guys like Trent, they watched, they waited, and they passed you along when they were done." The words hit hard. Too familiar. Ellie's hands tightened around the phone. "I'm sorry, Tyler," she said. "You trusted us to fix this. We're late, but we're here now." Tyler didn't respond for a long time. Then, "Just don't stop." 2 weeks later, Maya came forward. Quietly. Through legal. No press. No cameras. She described being assigned late shifts with Trent. How he'd time the breaks so she'd be alone in the back. How he asked her if she had a boyfriend, then got angry when she said yes. How she told HR she didn't feel safe and they cut her hours in half. David sat with Ellie as they read the report together. Ellie closed it slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "They always said we were exaggerating." David nodded. "Until we weren't." That weekend, David walked into Store 1, the very first Graham Mart. Same floors, same shelves, same bell above the door. He walked the aisles alone, picked up a pack of socks, a bottle of laundry detergent, a candy bar. Then he walked up to the cashier, a teenager, probably working his first job. David placed the items on the belt. "You like working here?" he asked. The kid shrugged. "It's not bad. The manager's decent. Pays on time." David nodded. "Just remember something," he said. "If someone ever makes you feel small or unsafe or invisible, don't quit. Tell someone. And if they don't listen, tell someone else." The kid blinked. "Okay." David paid, took his receipt, and as he left, he thought, Maybe this is how it starts. Not with noise, not with headlines, but with a conversation. A choice. A girl like Ellie refusing to break. A kid like Tyler picking up the phone. A store like this one, slowly becoming a place people don't fear. It wasn't the end. It wasn't even justice. But it was movement. And for the first time in years, David Graham didn't feel like he was walking alone.